Welcome. In this video, I want to take just a couple minutes to respond by way again of David from Miracle Canine. His recent video put out titled Double Standards in Dog Training and Unhelpful Advice. And on this clip, he's going to be discussing the issue about the use of a remote collar. So again, I want to play some of this to offer some perspective, some insight into this issue that he's going to raise here.
Let's talk about thing number two. Some of these I'm just gonna kind of rapid fire through this, right?
Okay.
Let me find the other one I sent you. This is the problem: is I send you these things from 4 different places, so I gotta find out
I know.
Okay, so I saw this video this morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I sent it to you. And let me clarify before we watch this: I have no problem with this video. No, I have zero problem with this video.
Okay.
Right? So it's Oscar, this guy Oscar Mora, I think. I don't know, whatever. I think it's Oscar Mora. And Oscar does a lot of work with Michael Ellis. Oscar does a lot of work. He's very well respected in the sport dog world.
So here again, we're talking just to offer some little bit of context here. Talking about balanced dog training, okay, as it relates to using the remote collar, just like David identifies as a balanced dog trainer. So let's continue here.
Okay.
Whatever.
Sure.
Right? Totally cool. Right? I get it. It's cool. Right? So he's working with a police canine handler in this video, and the dog doesn't want to out. So he's talking about how he's going to use the e-collar to stim the dog for not outing.
So here he's talking about again police canine, which again my background is police canine. So he's talking about here issue with a police dog not outing on command. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
Right? So, okay.
Chevy Silverado.
Out, no, fooey, out. It's like, out, he doesn't do it, boom, I'm going to correct. There you go. I say, good, bring out the ball and pay him right there from the...
So right here, showing a video again of this other trainer working with police canine handler, where he's about to bring out the toy and using a remote collar to get this dog to release.
From the pocket. Drop
Good
it.
boy.
There you go.
Good
Play,
boy.
play.
Yeah, good boy.
So with him, I would never do right turns. It would always be left, because he's already crowding you.
Yeah.
Tell him, look, so here, I'm not going to give him a chance. I'm just going to...
So here, okay, so here you have the trainer talking about crowding, okay, and the issue here that is focusing in on the issue with this dog not releasing on expressing control, okay, by way of the bite, okay, into an object. Okay, so but here's the issue. Okay, and so here, this is very much about again, we talk about the remote collar, talk about intercepting an express state. So his dog is expressing control in and through the relationship. So the remote collar being used to intercept that state. But here's the problem. Okay, I want to talk about this in terms of I talk about the mix, okay, the intermix of this idea in terms of balanced dog training, okay, as a process or as a way to establish relationship with a dog. Especially again, we're talking about what I call the 1 percentile dog or the high drive dog, such as a police dog, okay, that where you know a process or in terms of your role, okay, and how you're connecting, how you're interacting with the dog, making sense, okay, to the dog, especially when you get in this whole thing about okay expressing control, which I talk about as a conditional state, okay, in and through the relationship. When I say conditional state, it means everything filters through relationally. It's an extension of you. Okay, so a dog expressing control, basically saying, green light, okay, and red light, okay. But in terms of, again, here's the problem, okay, we'll talk about this in terms of the overall relationship. So we talk about a certain moment here, for example, where a dog is expressing, control, Okay, it isn't about just a moment. Okay, it's about how you're seen in an overall way within the relationship itself. Okay, so this whole thing about just focusing in on a certain kind of interaction or a certain moment where those expressing control, you have to, and this is where I'm going to talk about why people get into trouble here, or even why, say, in a certain moment when you're using that remote in that moment, and say a dog redirects, which can happen, redirects on the handler. Can you say, what just happened? How did I end up getting bitten? As I was, using a remote collar on the dog, and then the dog getting like, well, there must be something wrong with the dog, versus no, there's something absolutely wrong with how you're perceived in the relationship itself. Okay. And this is the point I want to make here when you're talking about, the superficial way in which trainers look at certain moments and try to package this up, and then bad things still happen, or you still aren't able to resolve, okay, the source of the problem. Okay. And what's the source of the problem is how you're perceived by the dog, okay, in the relationship itself, especially when you want the dog to perform a certain task, which is all about, okay, your dog being an extension of you in that task, in that relationship. And so here, he's talking about this dog crowding. Okay, talking about crowding. Well, the crowding part can be the kind of contaminated aspect of this anyway. Okay, this whole thing with, see, even a dog that, and you have the say the tug toy of the dog like taking a hold of your hand versus a specific area in that, in that object that, keeps it safe for you. Okay, I understand it's all about generating the right level of focus, the right way in which control is being expressed conditionally, so that you have control, reliability, trustworthiness, and this whole thing about even the dog releasing on command. Okay, say out, the dog outs. Okay, being in sync with or in harmony with the dog that way. Understand, this is about the whole thing about the overall way in which you're perceived in the relationship.
Tell him to out, and then pay him again. Good boy.
Good boy.
So here the problem is, okay, so he's talking about using that remote collar, okay, in that moment, and that dog releasing, but then allowing that dog just to reinvest in that, okay, which is a problem, can be a problem. Okay, this is where you have to kind of walk this back, okay, to look at, and this is where I would incorporate into, the entire relationship, the in terms of how this handler is connecting, interacting with this dog, in terms of, getting very specific into certain moments, okay, where the dog is making sense of how you're seen through your role through the role of influence and control. Okay, how that's layering up throughout certain interactions. So, for example, if you watch my videos, everything is taking the form of a demand initially, so that control is layered throughout. So, for example, the dog goes in, say, you want the dog to down, you're actually expressing control over that dog in a very specific way. Because here's the problem, or here's the point, is when you see a dog like this that isn't releasing, we'll play some more of this as well here in a moment, because there's another little clue here, okay, that this is a issue by way of how the handler is thinking about even that collar that way, is how control and influence is layered throughout the relationship. So it even ties into this moment itself, expressing control towards objects, or again, through apprehension, okay, to make sure that, again, it's making sense to the dog. You're not going to have this type of redirecting on you, or a bad moment where, you start to look at the dog as the problem.
And the thing you got to get into is you got to just be consistent with everything. Because sometimes you're like, out, no, fooey, out. It's like,
so that's a point here, saying consistent with everything. So it's a conversation, verbally, but it's more about the conversation in terms of being intentional with the role of influence, okay, being expressed through certain interactions. Okay, so it's not just about, because understand that when you talk about balanced dog training, that's a problem. Okay, understand that's a problem with how influence aligns through that idea of things. Okay, and this is where I would not be doing this, like playing into this type of using the remote collar this way, knowing, okay, that this could generate that type of issue with getting redirected on, because you're at a high intensity point here. Understand that this thing about expressing control, once you're not perceived the right way anyway, and then you're trying to focus this way on, like, because understand that, the way you want to look at this is like, go back to the parent-child example. You might as a parent be, there's certain kind of aspects that really kind of go over the top in the relationship. Say, for example, your child is becoming very selfish, but they're overly invested in, say, video games. And so they'll have temper tantrums and they don't play well with others. But that becomes a kind of a source of contention for the parent, because that becomes your focus, right? That's like, I really don't like my child's acting that way with video games, but you don't really see what's happening the same way throughout the relationship itself. Like, how did you actually get there? Like, through your parenting style and through other interplays of the relationship, you're just annoyed. And I understand that. I mean, that's what happens, right? We get focused on one particular thing that really annoys us, but it's understand that's symptomatic, but the problem is, if you enter into that, say the video game example, and go in there like and say, I'm just gonna go in and I'm just gonna get right in the mix here. Well, ask yourself the question, what could happen? Right? It's like things could go way over the top, especially the child saying, what's going on here? He or she's not even, in the mix everywhere else, but they're just annoyed because that's like their focal point for whatever reason. But you as a parent have to look at the overall state, and then you have to ask yourself the question, what's the smartest way to do this, knowing that this is symptomatic of an overall problem, not just specific to that. But then, if you like what's happening here, if you draw into that this way and just start hitting that button like that, you could get bitten. Okay. And it doesn't mean you're gonna fix anything anyway. All right. Because it's about the overall state of the relationship. So let's just play some music.
Out. He doesn't do it. Boom. I'm gonna correct you.
But I guess I'm trying to and this is me trying not to overuse the.
So here's the clue right here. So he's saying, well, his kind of complaint is saying, well, I don't want to overuse the collar, right? So there's kind of a clue here.
E-collar. But the thing is, you're not gonna if you're consistent with it, then later you don't have to use it.
Okay, so he's saying if you're consistent with it, then you don't have to use it. But the problem here with this trainer is saying consistent. What does that mean? And I always talk about this thing with, overusing, which means that making the remote collar a kind of pivot point as like the main tool, the main thing to focus in on. And that's a problem. Like if you go watch one of my videos I did with, and you'll see it throughout my Flipping the Script series, where I talk a couple examples of that. Say with the Larry Crone seminar video, go watch that video. I talk about finding the working level, right? When control is manifesting, right? Letting control manifest. And then what has to happen? Well, that you got to dial that remote collar up, because control is already being expressed, right, in the relationship. But balanced dog training, understand balanced dog training does not represent being dialed into the relationship the right way to begin with. Okay, it does not align through a dog's state of mind that way. And so again, that gets into this whole issue about, why bad things happen or why the issue never gets resolved, because it's about being dialed into the relationship in such a way that's going to make sense to the dog. And then you don't get into the situation where you're in the middle of, it'd be like, a dog you wanting to chase cars, and you're going down to in the middle of a traffic jam saying, I'm going to deal with this right here in the middle of a traffic jam. That doesn't make sense. Bad things going to happen. So it's like you have to look at things as being symptomatic. Then you have to layer this up So that what's the smartest way to do this so that you're going to have a good outcome here? The dog is going to, everything's going to line up properly. So you have to take this back and walk this back to a proper process that's going to layer in, okay, and through the intentional interaction based method, that's going to layer it in other aspects of certain interactions. And then the dog saying, okay, this is making sense now. Then we start to focus in on slowly on the interplay of express and control that way through the game of tug and everything else. Because here's the point too: when you get a dog starts to express control that level, it's like the handler's faded out of the relationship. Okay, at a certain level, and that's where you'll see it even through tracking, where the dog's so focused on getting the bite, the dogs start lifting their head off. They're not invested in terms of the scent properly. The dog lifts their head out, wants to visually cue up, kind of shortcut it, so they can get the bite. Okay, that's again symptomatic of a problem, right? Where the dog, you're faded out. It's not an extension that way. So again, I encourage anyone, you look for information. If you're a canine handler, you have this type of issue, I would encourage you to consider. You can look at my website, lots of great information as to how to do this. I even made my police canine guide available for free. Okay, so it gets into more about the tracking, the bite work, but it's all this information's in there. So I'd encourage you to check it out for free on my website. Thanks for watching.